Hi guys, we are actually going to go over some review. This is going to span from just before you got out through the e-learning times. So we're going to start with the 5 fingers of evolution. And this was a video that was shared out with you. It was an ed puzzle. I'll also share the video with you with the YouTube link. But it shows you the 5 fingers of evolution. Basically, what needs to occur in order for evolution, which is change over time, to happen. So think all the way back to Strawfish Lab. During the Strawfish Lab, we had a 50-50 balance between the two allele frequencies. There were 10 blue straws, or 10 blue alleles, and there were 10 yellow alleles. We started that way every single time. If for some reason the allele frequency changed, and it didn't go to 50-50, it adjusted, that's when we saw evolution occurring. So in the very, very first demonstration that you did, the blue fish were going to get eaten every other time. So 2 blue alleles would disappear out of the gene pool anytime a blue fish would pass away. Because of that, the allele frequency did not stay at a 50-50 ratio. We started to see more blue alleles disappear out of the gene pool, and the gene pool was a majority of yellow alleles. So we actually saw almost extinction occurring in the blue fish and a shift in the population to be more green and yellow. That was evolution occurring. In the second 2 scenarios, you had a green fish that was going to get eaten every other time. When a green fish gets eaten, that's 1 blue and 1 yellow allele disappearing from the gene pool. That maintains that 50-50 or half yellow, half blue allele frequency. So evolution didn't occur. In the last scenario, every other blue and every other yellow fish got eaten. So again, 2 blue straws or 2 blue alleles and 2 yellow alleles would disappear. That maintained that 50-50 balance again. So evolution didn't occur in that circumstance either. So when evolution does occur, we do see a disproportionate imbalance, whatever you want to call it, to the allele frequency. There are 5 things that can happen to allow for this to occur. One is a small population size. If there were only 10 people left on an island, and those 10 people could only breed amongst each other, that gives you a very small gene pool and only selective alleles to pick from. So eventually that population is going to start to shift to look very similar to each other because there's only certain types and amounts of alleles that are available. Non-random mating. If you picked and choose what genes are actually going to progress forward in a population, you are basically swaying the way that the alleles in the gene pool are going to work. Oh, this person's attractive. I'm going to mate with this person, so then the attractive genes get passed on, so on and so forth. So non-random mating does start to steer a gene pool in a certain direction. Mutations, if added in, they can bring in new types of genes, which will change the frequency of the alleles, or it can make certain things disappear. So again, that's going to make an adjustment to the types of genes that are available in a population. As people move in and out, immigrate or emigrate from a population, they take their genes out of or add their genes to the gene pool. And again, that can start to adjust that frequency. The last one is adaptation. We know already that selectively advantaged individuals are going to be better adapt to survive. So this we saw in the bead lab. As the beads that were able to stay camouflaged survived each round, they passed on their genetics. And eventually the entire population started to also carry in that direction. So if you had a red background wrapping paper, towards the end of the simulation, almost all of your beads were red. So again, the beads didn't turn red, but the red gene was better adapt to survive, and therefore they passed that red gene on in the gene pool, or those red alleles on into the gene pool, and eventually that's what you saw in the population. So that's a bit of a review. If you're still struggling with that, please go back over that video. We're going to move on further into the evidence for evolution. This was that station lab that you went through. It was a 2-day lab, Thursday and Friday of the e-learning days. You would go station by station. I think you did half on Thursday, the other half on Friday. And basically this is showing you the evidence that we do have to show change over time in populations and in species. So one of the first things we're going to take a look at though is fossils. So fossils, again, basically the preservation of living organisms. Most things that are preserved are going to have hard parts or bones. A lot of the soft tissues don't make it into a fossil, but we have a little bit of an animation here. And this is just a little shell that is going to get covered and buried by sediment in the bottom of the ocean. And as that sediment goes over time, it starts to turn to stone. And eventually the hard parts start to go away, but minerals replace the shell and the imprint, and they leave a cast behind. And that cast is the fossil that we look at. So if you've ever been down to the Field Museum, you saw Sue the dinosaur and her skull, you have seen a cast basically of those bones. The bones have been replaced by minerals. So we look in here, and again, with fossils, we can dig down and down and down and down and down, and eventually we hit fossils. In your backyard, if you dug down enough, you would find some sea creatures, because at one point we were underneath the shallow sea. And as you dig down deeper, the world gets older. So we're going to go on. So again, as we dig down deeper, the world does get older. And what we're looking at then is the fossil record. So scientists all over the world are digging and digging and digging, and they're going through the layers of rock, and they're communicating with each other to try to put the organisms that they're finding in order, essentially. So they talk to each other. We can date things using carbon dating and radiometric dating, and we try to place the puzzle pieces of the Earth back in order. So we have the fossil record over here. And what we did was we discovered that the Earth is made of layers, but these layers get older as we travel down into the Earth. New rock forms at the top. So again, we can date the items that are in the rock layers, and we can figure out what's happened in the past. And that's how we know that Illinois was at one point underneath the shallow sea. So again, this is how a fossil is created over time, and then we can take a look at the layers and figure out what's going on. So we do have fossil videos. We can go through that. If you want to, you can click on the fossil video that you have available for you as well. It's a 4-minute long video. But that is one piece of evidence that we do have for evolution. We have seen organisms change over time in the fossil record. We know that dinosaurs have evolved and changed. We have bones of humans that we have found in the past, or human ancestors that we have found in the past. And we've seen how things have progressed over time. So that is one piece of evidence that we do have to show evolution or change over time. Another one is homologous structures. So homo means same, so same structure, but they have a different function. When you visited this station, there was an image of all of these organisms and their bones. So if you take a look at the human, the cat, the whale, and the bat, again, we all have the same structures, the same bones. This is the humerus, the ulna and the radius are down here in the wrist bones. We all have phalanges that make up our fingers, but they function differently. The fingertips of the bat are spread out really wide to make the actual wings. If you take a look in the whale, their bones are flattened out a lot more, and they help make that paddle so they can push themselves through the water a lot easier with stronger, abilities. Think about it. If you tried to push through the water with your hands open versus your hands closed like a paddle, you're going to be able to push water away faster and get more oomph to your movement if you actually close your hands up and make it more of a paddle. Cats, they run, they jump. We usually use ours to hold things, grab things. So again, these are all common bones that we see, and we see them in each species because we're all different species, but we use them differently. The next one is called analogous structures. Analogous structures are the opposite. So they are the common function, but they don't have the same structure. This one always trips people up a little bit. So all of these organisms use these structures for the same function. They use them to fly, but they are not made out of the same material, the same components. So if we look at the bat wing, again, the bats have bones, birds have bones, but insects don't have bones. So these guys are different, evolutionarily speaking. Okay, they don't have a common ancestor. They just all happen to fly, which is not the same thing. Where if we look above, we must have diverged from a common ancestor because we actually have the exact same structures, all of us, with the same bones. So that's analogous. The next one is vestigial structures. Vestigial structures are structures in the body that have no function for that organism, but they did in the past. So when you went to this particular station, they talked a lot about the cat's third eyelid. And we'll see that here in a second. But humans have stuff like an appendix. Okay, we don't need our appendix anymore for survival, but it's still there. It's not going to disappear. Some people do have to have it removed because it becomes a bit of an issue, and you'll survive without it. But again, it's not going to go away. We take a look here in this image. Whales, they have a pelvis and legs. It's still there. Somewhere in the evolutionary process, there's a common ancestor with whales that at one point needed this hip and this leg bone to walk. Snakes also have this. So again, somewhere in the evolutionary period and transition, there was an organism that did walk and did use those hind legs. And then over time, again, that particular adaptation wasn't necessary for survival anymore. It kind of gets smaller, gets tucked away, and again, doesn't disappear. Your wisdom teeth are the same way. We've got other things as well. So as we go through this then, we see other variations, and you can obviously look at the videos that are up here for other stuff, but here's your appendix. The naked mole rat, he still has the eye sockets, but again, doesn't need the eyes in order to, chill underground. So leftover structures that are not needed today to be fit. So modern evidence with embryology is another big component of this. And if you look at all the embryos here in their developmental stages, which you watched the video for, you can see that most of us look exactly the same in the beginning of our development. And then we start to differentiate. Mammals look a little bit more like each other longer. The animals that live more in aquatic environments kind of, look more similar, and so on and so forth. So again, this shows us that there are some commonalities between certain organisms, and then there are evolutionarily divergent things that occur, like the fact that humans look more like this than like that later on in life or later on in development. DNA similarities is another one. We can compare DNA just like you did in your hemoglobin blast. And if organisms have more similar DNA, they are evolutionarily more, closely related to each other. So we can look at relationships that come along with this. And you can see us compared to many different types of organisms. Obviously, the less we have in common with each other means that, again, we are not as related. So you've seen this image before. Chimpanzees and humans up here have some sort of common ancestor. We still exist today with each other. No, we didn't evolve directly from each other. We are different species, and therefore we're on different portions and sides of this tree. But you can see all of the other ancestors of Homo sapiens that have gone extinct over time. Again, Homo neanderthals, if you've ever seen Neanderthals, the typical caveman look, they went extinct, but we did survive at the same time as them. Different species, though. Again, the last thing is continental drift. We do have evidence of fossils on different continents that typically wouldn't be near each other, so you can take a look at this. There's also a review video on here that's going to review all of the topics that we just talked about. I would definitely go through this video, make sure that you still have some understanding of this material. If you have questions, please feel free to email.